as unaccustomed as I am to the limelight. So one of my favorite stories involves a trip that Don mentioned to Europe in 1968. And as you know, my dad knows the cast of characters of the Beat Generation, one of which, of course, is Allen Ginsberg. And back in those days, in '68, you didn't actually fly over to Europe. You actually took a boat over to Europe. That was, and besides, my dad actually got a discount on the boat because he was a trainman for the Southern Pacific Railroad. And as you probably know, if you have parents who grew up in the Depression area, they saved money, they clipped coupons, and that was, of course, what led to us taking, in '68, about 3.5-month trip through Europe, which, of course, most people don't get to do. So my sister and I, literally, I think we spent about 10, 11 months total in Europe traveling with our parents. So on this one trip, I believe Alan was in a rent-controlled apartment in New York City, and we went to visit him, and he said, "Oh, you're going to Europe? Well, I have a new book of poems that I'd like you to distribute to some of my colleagues and friends in Europe." And so we said, "Hey, great." So he gave us half a dozen or a dozen copies of his latest book of poems. And so we throw them in the suitcase, we get on the boat. On the way over to Europe, we found out that the Russians invaded Czechoslovakia. And Prague was one of the stops that we were scheduled to make. So we were kind of concerned that we wouldn't be able to deliver the book of poetry to his colleagues in Prague. And so we go around through Europe. We finally get to Vienna, which was going to be the launching pad for the trip over to Prague. And my parents, again, always save a dime, always like to stay in bed and breakfast outfits instead of big hotels. And as it happens, where we were staying was a bed and breakfast that I think virtually everybody else in the bed and breakfast were refugees, Czech refugees who had fled Czechoslovakia when the Russians invaded. Okay. And as it happens, the gal and her daughter who lived right next door, my parents befriended, and particularly the mother, I think, spoke a fair amount of English. That was good for us, and because we were planning to go to Prague. And at the same time, her sister came down to visit, and they formulated a plan that we were going to take the sister back to Prague and actually stay in the apartment for the gal and her daughter who had fled. And as it turns out, she was a widow of a Supreme Court justice in the Czech Communist Party. Wow. So that was kind of an interesting scenario. And so we actually took her and, of course, the books that we were going to deliver to Allen Ginsberg's. And for those of you who are old enough and have seen the Cold War movies with the border, with the machine gun tower and the spotlight and the barbed wire and the German Shepherd dogs, that's exactly what we saw when we hit the border between Austria and Czechoslovakia. And I know my sister and I were kind of looking at each other saying, "Why are we going there?" But they did let us through. And one of the interesting things, and again, I don't know if this is ever in the history books, but one of the very interesting things happened. When the Czechs knew that the Russians were invaded, they took every street sign in the country down, so the Russians couldn't find where they were going. Not only did they ever take every street sign down, but they took every number on your house down. So if for some reason they wanted to arrest somebody on, 10th Street, well, they didn't know where 10th Street was, and they didn't know where number 18 on 10th Street was. So that was kind of an interesting scenario. The other thing is, and of course that's no longer true, but the other thing is, part of the road from Vienna to Prague were dirt roads. And because there were no street signs, we were not quite sure where we were going. We know we wanted to go to Prague. Fortunately, the woman that was riding with us spoke the language, and so we actually did get directions from folks to find our way to Prague. And we get to Prague, which is kind of a little bit of a valley, and again, my sister and I, as we're driving over the hump down into the valley, we see row after row of Russian tanks with their guns pointing to the center of Prague. Wow. And again, we're thinking, why are we going here? So we did get there. We did actually stay in the apartment, and it was kind of interesting. Again, they were high up in the Communist Party. One of the things that struck me is on the desk in his den was a copy of Time magazine in English and a pen and pencil set from Parker Brothers. And we actually got there, and of course we have the contact information for the people who wanted to, get Alan's latest book. Called him up, said, "Hey, we got a book from Alan. Great, hey, where are you?" Gave him the address. He said, "Oh, that's where the government employees live. We don't go there."
Oh my goodness.
So they literally arranged a clandestine rendezvous at a cafe somewhere where the book was literally slipped under the table so no one could see what was going on there. And that was one of the vivid memories of our trip to Europe, because not only, again, not just being friends and colleagues with the Beat Generation folks, but actually being a smuggler, taking contraband literature behind the Iron Curtain, and that was pretty thrilling to me. And, so again, that was just kind of the loving, spirited, Fruit Loops, fancy-free couple that my mom and dad were. And again, my sister and I got to ride along on a lot of those trips. I think everybody knows my dad loved to travel, and got to see a lot of the world. And if you haven't done it, you really ought to see the rest of the world, because it gives you a whole new perspective on the rest of the world. We get a little myopic sometimes here in the United States. We think the world revolves around us, and every time it does, but it's really a good idea to get out and see the rest of the world and to see what works and what doesn't work around the world. And to be open to different cultures, different languages. And so anyhow, I say I'm very pleased with the turnout here tonight. And he was my dad. He was not the Ed Dunkel, he was my dad. And this is a little confession I've made to a number of people. I've never read On the Road. And I'm not sure I ever want to. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.